World Cup Football Special next Tuesday at 7:20 comes live from Ninian Park, Cardiff, with exclusive coverage of Wales versus Scotland. A vital World Cup qualifying game with only one team certain of going through from Group 7. Spain is ideally placed with a home game against Iceland, which would leave the two home countries battling for one playoff place for the trip to Mexico next year. Join Brian Moore for exclusive live coverage of Wales versus Scotland next Tuesday at 7:20 on Thames.
Can I have your hand, Mummy?
Why, darling?
Because I've come to tell you a fortune.
How lovely. There. What do you see?
I see you're going to be a princess.
Really? How do you know that?
Because your hands are pretty like a princess.
Thank you. That's because I use fairy liquid. It's gentle and mild to help keep my hands soft and pretty.
So will you be a fairy princess?
That's right. With fairy liquid magic to make the dishes sparkling clean.
Can you tell my fortune now?
Maybe.
Let me look into my magic bubble.
What do you see?
I see a lovely little girl with my tea towel on her head.
Now hands that do dishes can feel soft as your face with mild green fairy liquid.
You can trust the dealers in Car Buyer. Car Buyer, in your newsagents now, only 20p.
Olé, as they say. And should you ever cast a net over this land of castanets, better carry a card, please. Will they mend your Fiesta while you take a siesta?
No.
Will your plastic settle the bill with the Barber of Seville?
No.
The fact is, in Spain, the Barclaycard is welcome at thousands more places than certain charge cards I could mention. Use it at restaurants, shops, dry cleaners, hotels. Visa España, you might say.
No matter where you bank, apply for a Barclaycard now.
You rub the left box out, then the right box out. Rub a bit, scratch a bit, and shake it all about. 3 diagonal crosses weighing 100,000 pounds. That's what it's all about.
Play SO Noughts and Crosses, and you could win £100,000, or any one of the 30,000 cash prizes to be won every day, where you see this sign.
Tomorrow at 10:30, take a drive through Death Valley, where danger lurks around the corner.
Billy, bet I know what you'd like.
Hey, that's the RV we saw this morning.
He's back at it again, Perry. That girl's cut the same way as those two last year.
Sure blabbing about it ain't gonna do nothing except maybe scare folks around town half to death.
A boy witness.
Hi, Billy.
Trapped in Death Valley. Tomorrow at 10:30 on Thames.
When a 70-year-old man turns to crime, Mike Stone's sent to investigate tonight at 11:30. This is Thames from London.
The engineers and the TUC, it's a split. Mr. Scargill wins, Mr. Kinnock says, I'll decide. Under the Tebbit umbrella, the man who sold 1 million. The spy master with the tricks of his trade. And now they've found her, will they raise her? Good evening. The Trades Union Congress heard tonight that it faces the biggest division in its history. The General Secretary of the Engineering Workers' Union, Mr. Gavin Laird, says the union's executive is committed to accepting government money for union ballots. The TUC's General Secretary, Mr. Norman Willis, has been with the union tonight trying for a compromise. He didn't get it. The majority of the unions are against taking the money and voted that unions must not deliberately defy Congress decisions. The electricians' president, Mr. Eric Hammond, says if the engineers are thrown out, they'll be out too.
The pressure to reaffirm TUC opposition to government labour laws brought the crisis over state funding for ballots to a head. The engineers and electricians' stand drew condemnation, but some support.
In a battle, do you send 2 guards regiments back to the barracks? What military commander would do that? All I can think is only those who have failed.
Opponents to Composite 2 have said we're fighting yesterday's battles. Clive, who also opposes Composite 2, I'm sure wouldn't agree with that, because he referred to the charge of the Light Brigade. And Clive asked the question, do you send 2 regiments back to the barracks, he said, when you face a battle? Well, the simple answer, Clive, is yes, you do, if they've given notice of deserting.
The vote for continued defiance was overwhelming. Later, the engineers' executive set off seemingly in light spirits to make their crucial decision, whether to promise that they won't accept government money for future ballots or defy Congress to expel them. The executive had till now relied on a 12-to-1 vote by their members to keep taking the money. After a 90-minute session, the General Secretary, Gavin Laird, left to draft a statement explaining that the union's position couldn't be changed. Since the weekend, the 10-man executive's position had hardened from 6-4 to 7-3 against the TUC. Soon after 9 o'clock, Mr. Willis arrived at the engineers' hotel to meet Mr. Laird and the executive.
I'm going the wrong way.
The very latest on the engineers now. We have an interview from Blackpool about precisely what their position is and how they reached it.
By Congress, we find ourselves therefore in a position of having to say to the General Council that we are not prepared to take any action that could be construed as rejecting the decision of our members who, as stated, voted by no less than 12-1 in favour of our accepting public money for balloting purposes. Neither are we prepared to ignore the decision of our National Committee, our policy-making body, whose instruction was not to apply for further public funds until such time as we had balloted our members again, and in turn thereby allowing the whole of our membership to decide the policy as to whether or not to continue to apply for such funds. In conveying both our concern and disappointment, as contained in this letter, in no way impugn the sincerity of those.
With the Congress also voted by 64,000 to back Mr. Arthur Scargill's demand that a future Labour government should review the prison sentences on miners, reinstate sacked miners, and pay the miners' unions fines. Labour's leader, Mr. Kinnock, said right away that under a Labour government he would decide.
The man who dominated the TUC last year but had been written off by some this year bounced back, successfully pushing through his motion, which the TUC General Council had strongly opposed and which is thought to be a severe embarrassment to the Labour Party.
You should vote for policies that demand justice for jailed miners, demand the reinstatement of those who've been sacked, and demand that a union whose funds have been seized should be reimbursed when our government is in power, like the Tories reimbursed their allies when they're in power. I move.
It fell to the hapless Norman Willis to appeal for the motion to be rejected. For his pains, he was heckled.
We cannot and must not put unions in a special situation and claim a special deal from a Labour government in the future. The idea that an election can deal retrospectively with individual fines is just not on.
As the miners watched anxiously, a number of key unions switched sides in the closest of card votes. The miners were delighted. All the indications before had been they'd lose. Many observers were saying tonight the clincher had been Mr. Willis's less than convincing performance. The vote is a major headache for Mr. Kinnock in Blackpool tonight for dinner with TUC leaders.
Whilst my friendship with the Trades Union Congress is firm and lasting, that doesn't imply universal and continual agreement on every issue.
Could you give me a sort of one-word answer? You are not prepared to accept what they've suggested today?
The form of the resolution and the way in which practicalities are taken account of, and the fact that we hope that there will be successes in certain areas even before we get a Labour government in 2 or 3 years' time, mean that it would be difficult to put it on a slice of bread and swallow it.
So the miners had come up with the unexpected once again, their next target to make the Labour Party adopt the policy at their conference in a month's time. Giles Smith, News at 10, Blackpool.
Mr. Geoffrey Archer, the former Conservative MP who escaped financial ruin by becoming a multimillionaire author of bestsellers, has joined the new Tory team for the next election. He's the Deputy Party Chairman. His new boss, Mr. Norman Tebbit, said Mr. Archer's job would be to cover the country with style and dash.
It had long been predicted Mr. Tebbit would take over as party chairman to gear up for the next election. He said he was in good physical shape now after the Brighton bomb, but he would have to go into hospital again for stitching up some tatty corners. But is his tough and sometimes abrasive image the right one for the party?
I think so, because after all, this country lives in a tough world, and we've got to be tough ourselves. We've got to be realistic. I'm not a man to go around wearing my heart on my sleeve, but it doesn't mean I haven't got a heart.
Mr. Tebbit posed with his new deputy chairman, novelist Geoffrey Archer, who he suggested would help give the party more dash and style. The rise and fall and rise again of Geoffrey Archer has all happened at breathtaking speed. At the age of 29, he was elected MP for Louth and became the youngest member of the Commons at the time. But 5 years later, his political career was in ruins. After losing more than £400,000 in an investment collapse, he had to resign his seat. The ex-MP took up writing to clear his debts. He's been so successful, he's now turned himself into a multimillionaire. He's thought to be worth £5 million. He's produced 5 blockbusters in 10 years. The publication last year of First Among Equals, a story about 4 MPs trying to become Prime Minister, was accompanied by unprecedented promotion and publicity.
But starting this Sunday, the Mail on Sunday will make newspaper history.
Geoffrey Archer lives in a luxury flat overlooking Westminster. He's only just finished writing his latest novel.
I've handed in the new book, so for the next 2 years now I shall not write at all. My main job and main task will be backing up the new chairman and doing everything I can to see that the Conservative Party wins the next election.
What particular qualities do you believe that you're bringing to the job?
That was the Prime Minister's decision, not mine, but I would like to believe energy and a desire to go around the country and support those working in the constituencies and back them up in their work.
Not the ability to write fiction?
No, certainly not.
The new Northern Ireland Secretary, Mr. Tom King, is in Belfast tonight. He says he wants to meet the Foreign Minister of the Irish Republic very soon. Politicians north and south of the Irish border have criticised Mr. Douglas Hurd's unexpected move from Northern Ireland to the Home Office at what Dublin calls a crucial stage in the current Anglo-Irish talks. Before he left, Mr. Hurd welcomed his successor to the province.
After lunch with Mr. Hurd, Tom King emerged to Stormont Castle steps, anxious to dispel any reports that his hour-long meeting on Sunday with Mrs. Thatcher indicated a reluctance for the job. With the current Anglo-Irish initiative now one of his headaches, cooperation with Dublin, he explained, was a priority.
Try and get some better understanding and better relationship with the Republic is important. To get a greater sense of confidence between the majority and the minority community is important. But also very much, and I'm very conscious of this, the economic, the employment situation of Northern Ireland is a very difficult one. I think this is one of the most challenging jobs that exists in the whole government.
Mr. Hurd made few political friends here, the local parties remembering newspaper quotations that he thought little of their leaders' quality or calibre. But his success may be measured in the London-Dublin initiative, still not agreed, but in which he played a key role. Tom King takes over at this crucial time in cross-border relations. Mr. King must now convince Catholic politicians here that he can quickly come to grips with the detail of the Anglo-Irish initiative. But at the same time, he faces the most fiery Protestant tempers since the failed Sunningdale executive of 1974. In all, perhaps a bad time for a change in this most unpopular cabinet post. Michael Macmillan, News at 10 at Stormont.
Mr. Leon Britton said today he was surprised to be moved from the Home Office in Mrs. Thatcher's reshuffle, but he said it was an insult to people needing jobs to imply that he'd been demoted to trade and industry, where he said there was a tremendous task to be done.
Together with the Employment Secretary, I think we have a tremendous job to play. And if one's looking at it purely in the prestige terms, which I think many people find a little distasteful, if not old-fashioned, the fact that My position in the cabinet ranking table, for what it's worth, remains exactly the same. Shows that the Prime Minister's expressed concern about the economy and the importance of the need to give first priority to that is reflected in what she's done.
Mr. Cecil Parkinson said today he now accepted he would not be in the government team for the next general election. John Underwood asked him if it was difficult for him to appreciate Mrs. Thatcher's dilemma in deciding whether to take him back.
No, I think the Prime Minister has advisers, and she listens, and she weighs up their advice, and she measures them against her own instincts, and she comes to a decision. That's what she did on this occasion.
That implies then that you would not expect, at this point, to be included in the Cabinet before the next election?
Yes, of course.
18 British tourists were injured when 2 hand grenades exploded beside an hotel swimming pool at Glyfada near Athens. 12 were in a party of deaf and dumb holidaymakers from Birmingham. Tonight, 6 of the injured were still in hospital. 1 is seriously hurt. The Palestinian Black September organization said it did it. The grenades were thrown into the grounds of the Hotel Glyfada from the street. The Glyfada is next door to the Hotel London, where earlier this month a bomb injured 13 tourists, 6 of them British.
The West German Chancellor, Dr. Helmut Kohl, has rejected demands by opposition leaders for the resignation of the Interior Minister, Herr Zimmermann, for his handling of the country's worst spy scandal for 30 years. Dr. Kohl said he wouldn't be dictated to by foreign intelligence services. In a stormy parliamentary debate, Herr Vogel, leader of the Social Democrats, said the defections to the east had reduced the country to a banana state. ITN has spoken to one of the country's top spy catchers, who says he's still up against 3,000 East German agents, despite the defectors.
Today's Bundestag debate turned into a party political battle. Herr Vogel, the opposition leader, serious in his demand that the minister responsible should resign. And by way of reply, Chancellor Kohl laughing off the political attack, which he can do more easily in a country where the border with East Germany means spying is always an acute problem. Yet officially, West Germany does not recognize this border. There is no such thing as a divided Germany, officially. And therefore, anybody who comes across into West Germany from the east is automatically granted political asylum. That policy means that despite the wire and the watchtowers, East Germany has an easy job sending agents, either directly or through third countries, into the West, where other agents can be recruited, perhaps in all 3,000 spies for East Germany, the DDR. Everyone knows it goes on, and to reassure people it's not out of control, West German spy catchers sometimes go public. So in Hamburg we met Christian Lochter, head of the state equivalent of MI5. He thinks and reads a good deal too about what turns people into spies. So, is there one simple answer?
No. We have round about 3,000 spies in West Germany. And therefore, we have 3,000 different reasons. For example, money, sex, or political. All could be a reason.
More at ease in his native German, Lochter says that most spies are very busy people, good at their jobs too, because that helps to prevent suspicion. He thinks that the East Germans' biggest mistake is to approach far too many people. Quite a few tell his office and can be used and are used in counterintelligence operations. Like all professionals, Christian Lochter and his staff like talking about their spoils of war, and they have their own collection of the tools of the spying trade. The dressing case, which if you can locate the pinhole lock, reveals a secret compartment in the lid. The screwdriver, with a complicated spring mechanism in the handle. A handle which turns out to be hollow. And the best engineered of them all, a fruit juice can, apparently full of liquid and weighing the right amount, which also turns out to be a useful and at first sight completely undetectable container. And the Hamburg spy catchers say, even in the age of electronic espionage, they're still finding that this sort of equipment is being used. Michael Brunson, News at 10, Hamburg.
73 years on, it seems they've really found the Titanic. There's no wreck they can't reach now. But what will they do with the old girl? A report next. Plus, the Isles, where every call's long distance. And calling on Charlie, who else could it be? That's in a couple of minutes.
Hey man, where does a guy have to go to get a little peace?
Trio. I want a trio and I want one now.
Ouch!
Not one, not two, but three things in it. A chocolatey biscuit and a toffee flavor too.
Like a man's gotta do, a man's gotta do, man.
No three things are quite as good together as a...
Hey, next time it's the Amazon.
There's just one company today that designs and builds more types of aircraft, defense weapons, and space systems than any other single company in the world. That is one of the world leaders in international collaboration in aerospace. That is one of Britain's leading exporters at the heart of an industry which directly employs over 200,000 people. We're British Aerospace, up where we belong.
What is it that makes a cat want to get his teeth into new Catkins Premium? You've got it. It's the chunks. The wonderfully tasty chunks, packed with all the meaty goodness he needs in a way he'll love. New Catkins Premium Meaty Chunks for a cat to get his teeth into.
With Abbey National's new 5-star account, you don't have to be a star. You can start off with as little as £500. Get instant access to your money with no penalties, so you won't get your fingers burnt. And the more you invest, the higher the interest rate goes. You don't have to be a star to get Abbey National's new 5-star account.
When you've got a bit of a problem with a gas appliance, call the gas people.
I wonder if you could possibly help. Well, it's Kenway, is it? Is your central heating not working? We'll have to see what we can do about that.
We understand. We care. And we can help.
Mrs. Kenway, I've come to fix your central heating.
Our service engineers are experienced, fully trained, care about their work and how it's done.
It won't give you any more trouble.
Service from the gas people
Cheerio.
isn't just service. It's service with care.
Mr. Wallace?
That's gas service care.
A Texan oil millionaire said tonight he intends to dive for the treasure on the Titanic. Mr. Jack Grimm made his announcement only hours after a French-American expedition confirmed that they'd pinpointed the sunken liner upright on the ocean bed. The leaders of the expedition say any attempt to raise the ship or salvage its cargo would be ridiculous. And a British woman who survived the disaster but lost her father said raising the Titanic would be like digging up a grave.
She was the pride of the empire, a floating Ritz, and they said absolutely unsinkable. More than 2,000 souls set sail on the maiden voyage of the RMS Titanic. They included some of the wealthiest men of the day. But within a week, the crowds that cheered her off were back outside shipping offices, waiting for news of missing friends and relatives. The impossible had happened. The Titanic had sunk. The liner had struck an Atlantic iceberg. Hollywood would later recreate the fateful moment the Titanic went down, taking 1,500 people with her. Now, 73 years on, the wreck has finally been located, more than 500 miles south of Newfoundland, on the Titanic's route to New York. A team of French and American scientists say they found wreckage from the Titanic and have identified it using these submersible cameras 13,000 foot down on the seabed.
We came on it early this morning. It just bang, there it was right on top of it.
They've seen one of the boilers and in the background some very large objects which may be sections of the hull.
As expedition members celebrated their success, thoughts were already turning to a possible salvage operation. The Commercial Union Insurance Company officially owns the wreck. The Lloyd's Lost Book shows she was carrying millions of pounds in gold, diamonds and jewellery. The British company that recently raised the Rainbow Warrior in Auckland Harbour using inflatable canvas bags hopes to use the same system to raise the Titanic. But salvage plans have been attacked by Eva Hart, who was 7 when she escaped from the sinking Titanic.
As far as I'm concerned, it's my father's grave. And for that reason, I'd rather it was left. The whole thing I've lived with it all my life, and it's so horrific, the sight of it going down and the sound of all those people drowning. I don't want to say it again.
If salvage crews can raise the Titanic, this is how the filmmakers believe she could look. Although scientists say they're waiting for more information before they can be sure the real wreck is as well preserved as the film version.
British Telecom's boast that it doesn't cost much to stay in touch doesn't impress the Shetland Islanders. A short local call can cost them £1 or more. The islands are 100 miles from the mainland, and the locals say the phone is a vital lifeline for them. Telecom says the islanders are highly subsidised already.
The islanders live in some of the loneliest places in Britain. Cut off from the mainland, their only communication is by air, sea or telephone. The island of Fula, population just 47, has 18 families and one very old telephone box. Their whole economy and way of life relies on the telephone. It's not a luxury, they say, but a necessity. A call from this box to Lerwick, 35 miles away, costs almost £1.
90p. Right.
A quarter of some people's income goes on their phone bills. The average quarterly charges are more than £150 per line, more than the power bills in the case of many islanders. Most families have private lines, but they feel they're hard done by because their calls within the Shetland archipelago are charged at trunk rates. It's unfair, they say, because the phone's not for gossiping, but for surviving.
1 bag of hen food, 2 loaves.
We're not asking for special treatment in talking to the rest of the UK. What we're looking for is that people in different communities within Shetland can speak to each other on the phone and in fact can have a reasonable existence without it costing them the earth.
British Telecom, who are also unpopular for wanting to close the exchange, say special Shetland rates could be negotiated, but they're mindful that small concessions here could become a blank cheque nationally. Not good enough, say island representatives who are heading south, hoping they'll find a sympathetic ear. Brent Sadler, News at 10 in the Shetland Islands.
The World Health Organization said today there was little hope of finding a cure for AIDS in the near future. It said 40,000 people were reported to be suffering from AIDS, but several million more were silent carriers. Some of the most hopeful research is being done in Paris.
Bob White is one of 20 Americans in Paris who've come here desperately hoping to find a cure for AIDS. In February, he was told he had the disease. Soon after, he read that France had developed the drug HPA-23, which has given new hope to victims. Since then, he's been living with his male lover in the Latin Quarter of Paris, close to the hospital where he receives daily injections of the drug.
And in my case, we're pretty sure that it's working because I've been here now 5 months and I've had no infections, either minor or major. And she's speaking with my physician this morning, and it's a good sign.
HPA-23 was discovered at the world-famous Pasteur Institute in Paris. But researchers stress this is not a magical cure and years more work lies ahead.
For instance, if you have someone with cancer, you wouldn't dream of doing a short-term treatment and then saying, oh, he or she is cured. Maybe with this virus, it may take a long time before we're sure of its success. There are promising results, but I think one shouldn't go further than this.
The drug, which can have painful side effects, is manufactured in a small laboratory outside the French capital. Since it was revealed that film star Rock Hudson came to Paris for treatment, the drug's been in demand for research work in America. That will take some of the pressure off the hospitals here, which have been inundated by Americans. They've all volunteered to act as medical guinea pigs in the hope of receiving the experimental treatment. This week, for instance, Bob White will return home to California, where he'll continue to receive HPA-23, which he believes is keeping him alive.
It'd be nice to be able to go out dancing late at night and so on, like some of the things I used to do. But I think that for the time being, I'm looking at this as a real lease on life. I don't think in any way that we feel like we're dying. The people that are dying are the people that are not getting treated.
But even with treatment, many more will die. That's why the Pasteur Institute continues its search for the real answer to AIDS. Terry Lloyd, News at 10, Paris.
Here, Princess Anne talked about her childhood today and admitted that the one game she never played was at being a princess. That came later, she said. She was taking part in BBC Radio's Tuesday Call and was answering a question from the youngest caller, an 8-year-old girl from Enfield in Middlesex.
All little girls play at princesses. When you were a little girl, did you know you were a princess, and did you play at princesses?
I don't know when, you know, as a child you appreciate what you are, or if you have a title, what that means. But I'm afraid, no, I don't think a princess is anything I ever played at being, really. I've probably been playing at it ever since.
Later, Princess Anne went on to join a group of celebrities helping to launch a new children's book, a collection of poems and illustrations, the proceeds of which will go to help ease the famine in Africa. All the contributors have donated their work. Ken Livingstone, Paul Eddington, Kenny Everett amongst them. There's even a dutiful ditty from the Prime Minister. It's easy to be a starter, but are you a sticker too? It's easy enough to begin a job, it's harder to see it through. Billy Connolly gave a twinkling recital of his contribution.
There was a young Scotsman in Rotherham who had piles, which he said didn't bother him. When asked to cast light on his terrible plight, he said, it's nae bother at Rotherham.
There was a young bat in a cave who was clever and cheerful and brave. He hung by his toes and said, nobody knows the amount of shoe leather I save.
How long did it take you to write?
15 seconds.
That must be a world record.
For me, yes. Yes. Yes, these silly things come to me very easily.
I once knew a creature called Nellie who started to gobble the telly. I begged her to cease, but she'd eaten each piece. Now there's play school each day in her belly.
The original illustrations, including work by Ralph Steadman, Gerald Scarfe and Quinton Blake, will be auctioned in November, as will all the contributing artists' giant doodle board. Joan Thurkettle, News at 10 at the Guildhall.
Tonight, soccer, Saltingham out in Division 1, Birmingham 1, Man City 0, Coventry 5, Oxford 2, Liverpool 2, Whelan got 'em both, Forest 0, QPR 0, Arsenal 1. Wednesday 1, Everton 5, they go second, Lineker got 2, Southampton 1, West Ham 1. Division 2, Huddersfield 0, Blackburn 0, Shrewsbury 1, Portsmouth 1, Wimbledon 1, Barnsley 0. In the Milk Cup first round second leg, underlined teams go through. Bournemouth 2, Reading 0, Blackpool 1, Preston 3, Brentford 2, Cambridge 0. Bristol City 2, Hereford 0, Bury 5, Burnley 3, Carlisle 3, Crewe 4, Chesterfield 3, Bradford 4, Palace 1, Charlton 1, Doncaster 2, Notts County 1, Gillingham 2, Southend 0, Hull 3, Halifax 0, Middlesbrough 4, Mansfield 4, Millwall 4, Colchester 1, Newport 1, Bristol Rovers 0, Northampton 2, Peterborough 0, Orient 2, Aldershot 2, Rochdale 2, Wrexham 1, Scunthorpe Darlington postponed because of illness. Sheffield United 5, Rotherham 1, Stockport 1, Bolton 1, Swansea 3, Cardiff 1, Swindon 2, Torquay 2, Wolves 0, Walsall 1. Cricket, Gloucestershire stayed just 1 point behind Hampshire at the top. The rain meant that all the county games were drawn.
In the main news again, leaders of the Engineering Union announced tonight that they'd continue to accept government money for union ballots in defiance of TUC policy. It means the country's second biggest union could be suspended or even expelled. We're going back now to our industrial correspondent, Michael Green, who's in Blackpool.
It would now appear that the General Council, which meets tomorrow morning, will have to bite the bullet to recommend Congress to expel the engineers, knowing that the electricians will walk out too, or to back down. A partial climb down, effectively giving the engineers a suspended sentence, is being canvassed, but this would mean another humiliation for Mr. Willis and even greater disarray for TUC policy. Michael Green, News at 10, Blackpool.
Finally, Princess Diana went out into the North Sea today to the rig Charlie's Darling. Her outfit, a bright red survival kit. That had definitely not been seen by the fashion writers before. It was felt that she gave it something extra. Then into pink training shoes, green slacks and regulation helmet for a 3-hour tour. The welcoming party included an impromptu water display by the emergency support vessel Iolair, which duly got closer examination. The princess is said to have charmed the men who are called the Bears of the North Sea. One engineer said there was quite a hint of aftershave in the air. And then back into the flying suit. Well, what could she be voted but Charlie's Darling? They say it was unanimous. That's it tonight. Good night.
After the Thames News headlines, First Tuesday looks at the Abbeystead disaster and meets two survivors of the Battle of Arnhem.
If NEC's new thinking facsimile can phone documents in a matter of seconds, round the world or round the corner, at any time of night or day, to up to 100 different addresses, and redial if engaged, automatically adjust its own image quality for halftone or typescript, with foolproof simplicity, what could one do for your business? Dial 01200 0200 now for details of the NEFAX thinking facsimile range from NEC.
This Weimaraner, show champion Handsome Misty Blue, has been a best-of-breed winner no fewer than 5 times in less than 3 years. Right from the start, the name that stands for nourishment was there. Nourishment you can see. Firm, solid, good and meaty through and through. Pedigree Chum Nourishment.
Pedigree Chum has a very special place in my kennels. I've got a reputation to keep.
No wonder top breeders recommend it.
Pizza Land. We've got a passion for pizza. In 1983, Legal & General were investors in an oil company drilling in Muckluck, Alaska. Months later, they struck. Water. Not much luck in Muckluck. In 1977, Legal & General had shares in a company selling sprays to deal with Australia's perennial fly problem. But the drought killed off all the flies anyway. However, you have to speculate to accumulate. And despite the odd hiccup, Legal & General have doubled the value of their investments in the last 5 years, which is very good news for anyone who's got their money with us. Legal & General, only 99% certain of getting it right.
Good evening. Figures out today show a big increase in the number of drug addicts in London, and Scotland Yard are hitting back with a new campaign warning youngsters about the dangers of drug abuse. The number of registered addicts in London rose by 682 between 1983 and 1984, and now stands at nearly half the total for the whole country. Police say the real figure is probably 5 times higher, and have been armed with a catalogue of what drug taking involves. The pictures have been collected in the hope that the grim effects of drug taking they show will persuade more youngsters not to take up the habit. Police are tonight hunting 2 men who held up a bank in central London and got away with an estimated £27,000. The 2, both armed, threatened staff at the Allied Irish Bank in Bruton Street and escaped on a motorbike. There's a warning today that thousands of elderly people could face eviction from private rest or nursing homes in London because of a cash squeeze by the government. The Health Department usually pay all the costs of looking after old people in homes. An upper limit was introduced when some homeowners charged above the odds. But one charity is warning the limit is not enough to run homes in London, and they say unless old people themselves can make up the difference, they could be thrown out. 2 men have been arrested and are being questioned about the attack on a British Rail messenger at Caversham in Reading at the weekend. Alexander Bowhill is still seriously ill in hospital. Tower Hamlets Housing Committee tonight agreed to install an entry phone system costing £15,000 in Electric House at Bow, the target of an alleged racist attack last month. But the committee isn't installing other security measures demanded by the tenants, at least for the time being. The new Environment Secretary, Kenneth Baker, says he'll be sensitive to trying to protect greenbelt land around London. He said on Thames News tonight that instead he'll try to allocate more derelict land inside the capital for building. The strike by social security staff in Essex is to continue. Staff at Ilford voted today to stay out at least until Friday. They're complaining about the workload caused by alleged staff shortages. Finally, one of the world's largest sailing ships arrived at Greenwich today for a week's stay in the capital. The Amerigo Vespucci is a sail training ship from the Italian Navy. She's in London as part of an annual instruction course. She'll be open to the public on Friday and at the weekend. And Thames weather. Tonight, dry and mostly clear. Tomorrow, dry with some sunshine, becoming cloudy with rain later. The high 18 degrees Celsius at 64 Fahrenheit. And that's it. More Thames News tomorrow. Now it's time for First Tuesday.
Tonight on First Tuesday, 15 months after the Abbeystead explosion and still no compensation paid.
Anger is beginning to show itself more and more as time goes by.
And a remarkable story of survival from the Battle of Arnhem.
There was I with a bad stomach wound, and the German said, well, we won't bother with that one.